Oh,
Oh, hey, we're live. He was going to ask me a question, but I had already hit the button. So,
that's all right.
welcome. Welcome back to our channel. This is Family Tech, where you get all the tech tips, news, and information you didn't even know you needed. Today, I'm so excited. So, I usually plan out these lives with the topics in mind first. And then I go out and look for the absolute best person to cover that topic with me. And so I really have wanted to talk about special needs children for a really long time. And so I was doing some research and I stumbled across the Autism Dad. I don't have any kids with special needs, so it's not something I was automatically following, but I saw his content, loved it, super excited. So I reached out and luckily he accepted. So I'd love to introduce Rob. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your everything you're doing.
Sure. Thank you for having me. First of all, I've been following your stuff for a while because I'm a big tech guy myself, and I've learned a lot actually from you.
Okay.
And um, it was crazy when you reached out because I was like, it didn't connect at first, and I was like, I know who you are, and I was like, heck yeah, I'll do that. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, my name is Rob Gorski. I'm a single dad to 3 kids who are autistic and have some other challenges in their life. And I started out advocating and writing about my experience to try and help other parents who were kind of coming behind, me on this journey. And it kind of turned into a full-time thing. And one of the things that I really, really like to do, which I have a feeling you can relate to, is connecting families with technology that can improve their quality of life, right? And
That's my whole mission. Exactly.
right, and I think a lot of people are scared off by technology because they maybe don't understand it, or they assume like all screen time is bad time, and like there's a lot of things that could improve your quality of life and help your kids who might be struggling, but they just don't know. They just don't know what's out there. So I try to vet certain things myself, and if they work for my family and I'm comfortable with the company behind them, then I can feel comfortable talking about certain things that I know work, and I feel good about recommending to people, because a lot of families are struggling, and you don't want to, got to be careful where you invest your money, and sometimes stuff is a subscription or whatever, and it just needs to be worth it and legit and actually help. So
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something I'm super passionate about too. I don't accept a lot of sponsored content. We were talking before I hit the live button that I do have a full time job, and I just do this really because I am passionate about the topic and I want to help families out. And so I'm never going to recommend something that I wouldn't actually use. And so that's one reason I think you really
mhm.
resonate with your audience. So they know they can trust your recommendation, and I feel like that's important as well.
Yeah, people, I don't think people understand. There's a lot of money that you leave on the table because there's
It's so
so many
true.
companies who reach out, right? But you just can't, like, I can't do it. And so I'd rather work with a smaller number of people that are um, good at what they do. They're in it for the right reasons, and they're making a positive impact. So I totally understand where you're coming from.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. So, speaking of that, let's just dive right into some of my questions.
Sure.
The first is, what devices have you found that are best for kids with special needs? Like I said, like I'm going to be taking you're going to take the reins on this for the most part because, like
Sure.
I said, it's not something that is impacted my family, but I have lots of friends that I know will like find this so valuable.
Mhm. There's a couple of things that are sort of at the top of my kind of short list. There's a company called Mightier, and Mightier they created this biofeedback video game platform. It works like on your Android tablet or your iOS device, whatever. You can do it on your phone, or they have a tablet that they can send out. And the kid wears a heart rate monitor, like a wrist strap, like a watch kind of thing. And they've designed these games to integrate with the child's heart rate. And so as the child gets kind of worked up or stressed out, or just even too excited, their heart rate goes up and it starts to impact their gameplay. And they have like a visual display. It's all integrated into the game. So the kids think that it's just part of the game. And so they inadvertently learn to self-regulate and manage their frustrations and their anger and their emotions. That can be tough for kids who, whether they're autistic or just kids in general. I mean, like, self-regulation is a huge skill that it's not like taught in school. It's just kind of learned. And some kids, need a little bit of extra help. And like, kids they gravitate towards video games. And so it's out of Boston Children's and Harvard Medical. And they are utilizing the natural love of video games for kids to use it as a positive thing. And it makes a big difference. I mean, it's like a 90% success rate in kids. I think it's over like 105,000 kids have used it already. And my kids have been using it for years. Even my 22-year-old still uses it sometimes. And some of the games are like on Xbox Live. So they're fun games. And I've used it. It's fun,
Right.
right. I mean, and it's really cool the way that it works, because your kids learn without realizing that they're learning, and it just becomes muscle memory. And then they apply it to their everyday life because they start recognizing the feelings and the sensations, and they can their brain automatically kicks in, and they start calming techniques, and like Mightier walks them through everything. So like the game will pause and it'll give them strategies for calming down, just like simple proven things. And then they can watch their heart rate decline in real time, and then the game returns back to normal. And so kids are invested in the games, and they do what they have to do to play it, and it works really, really well. Very, 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 very cool.
That's amazing. And I didn't tell you this, but like, as you answer my questions, I will probably add questions. So I
Sure.
apologize for
No,
the
you're
ones
fine.
that
Go
I
ahead.
haven't given you. But I think I can see the benefit for even neurotypical kids for
Yep.
that, like you mentioned. I know my daughter has a hard time self-regulating, and we've gone to I'm not there yet, like the therapist, yeah.
Mhm.
I think neurotypical kids need therapy as well.
Everybody
Um,
needs. Yeah. Oh yeah.
Everybody needs therapy.
Good thing.
And so, yeah. And the main reason we wanted to take her when we did at the beginning was because we wanted to give her some tools to manage her emotions. And I think that's so important for all types of kids.
Oh yeah.
And then especially for neurodivergent kids. Um, but why do you think like something like a video game like resonates so well, especially with neurodivergent kids?
That's a really good question. And I think, one of the things, like I've talked about I have a bunch of like reviews and updated reviews that I've done on my website so that people can check that out. But like,
Oh, and I will link to he's got a code for Mightier, so I will link that in the description. Just
cool.
so you guys know, it'll be right here in the description if you want to go and check out this product.
Cool. Thank you.
Sorry, keep going.
No, it's okay. My youngest specifically, like, my kid's been in therapy forever, and we have tried those calming techniques. It's like take a deep breath, count to 10, like all those things that we're taught, and they just never they never clicked. Like he
Yeah.
grasped the concept, but it just never was never able to like apply it to himself. And I remember the first time. I mean, he started using Mightier, and I think it was a little frustrating at first, but there's no learning curve to it really. I mean, it's just if they play games anyways, they're just playing games and they learn how to play it.
Right.
But he got to a point where I started seeing him taking the deep breaths and then trying to play the game without his heart rate getting too high. So it became like a challenge for him, and he liked the challenge. And then I remember he was in a situation with his older brother, and they were sitting in the living room, and I was standing in the dining room, and I could see the gears turning. Like I knew where this was going to go. Right. And then rather than take the course that he would typically take, he stopped and he took a deep breath and he counted to 10, and nothing happened. And I was
Wow.
thinking, like, that is like the coolest parenting moment I've had up to that point in my
Right.
life. And it was so simple, but it took capturing his interest, which is video games,
Mhm.
to just connect those dots for him.
Right.
And I think that's what happens with a lot of kids. It's a lot of these are kind of abstract concepts, right? Like, how do you explain to a child, like, what it feels like to be anxious, or like, what is anxiety versus what is anger, what is fear, like, you know,
Yeah.
with when they can actually kind of quantify that with seeing what their heart rate is in real time and how that's impacting the game, which I guess is it's sort of how it would be affecting them in real life. Because when you get really worked up or upset, you make decisions are harder to make, or maybe you
Right.
lash out or whatever, and it affects your life. This affects the game,
Hmm.
and they eventually just learn that when you feel this way, this is what you do, and it's better for the game, and it also works in real life. And it isn't. I mean, it's. I would say it's like magic, but it's science. Which and
Right.
I love science, right? So, like, it's fact, and it's I mean, there's so many studies, it's all
Proven.
proven stuff. Yeah,
Yeah.
biofeedback works on humans, so, I mean, it just is what
Right.
it is. But it was such a
Yeah, that
brilliant
totally makes
concept.
sense. It really is. And as you were talking about that, that really, like, it made sense to me now, as you were talking, because it's so hard to practice those kind of things because,
Mhm,
how do you practice getting all worked up about something? You really can't because you're not typically like all worked up when you're having these conversations with
mhm.
your kids. And so that's a great way to like, oh yeah, okay, yes, my heart rate is elevated and this is how we fix it. So
Yeah.
yeah, I see how, that video game scenario can really help them develop that muscle memory like you were saying.
Yeah, and it's not being worked up or being upset or frustrated. It's not always necessarily a bad thing. I mean, sometimes
Right.
you're upset because something bad happened, or sometimes you're upset because, or you experience that same emotion or that same rise in heart rate because you're just excited about, like, the game is really fun. They're getting really into it, but their heart rate goes up and it gets too high and it creates a problem.
Yeah.
And they need to calm themselves down. And so the idea is that eventually they can just play the game without having to take those pauses and stop, because they're sort of regulating themselves as they go.
Right.
And it just works. And I the hardest part is getting parents to understand that you can have positive screen time. Like, not all screen time is bad.
Yes.
And I think that we are conditioned to, the less screen time, the better, but we can incorporate it in ways that are positive and that teach valuable life skills. And Mightier does that.
Yeah. And as you were saying, like you've even used it yourself. It just makes me think I have a treadmill where I have, a screen and, I've got a trainer and they're like walking me through and I've got a heart
Mhm,
rate monitor and it plugs in and everything. And I realized like I do the same thing because I want to stay at like, 6 miles per hour, but my heart rate is like too high. So I'm trying to like breathe and everything so that it won't lower my speed because I want to stay at the same speed.
mhm.
But if like my heart rate's too high, it's gonna lower my speed, and I'm like, no, 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 don't. Like
And
I'm
and
trying to
you
lower
figure
it.
yeah, and then you figure your body figures out how to navigate that, and then eventually you're able to do that 6-mile pace, keeping
Yeah,
your heart rate at a certain level, and you don't
yeah,
even have to think about it. It
right,
just but it makes you aware of what it is, and then you can I don't know, it's easier to understand, I think,
for
especially for
sure.
kids.
Yeah,
That's a good
absolutely.
analogy.
I know, thanks. Well, like as you were talking, I was like, oh yeah, I totally do that to try and keep my heart
Yeah.
rate down.
Yep.
um, so that's a great product. Thank you. And like I said, we're gonna have the link in the description with his affiliate link so he can get credit for that. And do you have any other devices that
Yeah,
you've thought
the
works?
yeah, the other one that I'm a really, really big fan of is called Goalie. It's Goally, and that is like a visual scheduler. And so it comes on a tablet, or you can have an app, and it helps kids learn to manage their own day without, like, you as a parent having to micromanage everything that they're doing. So they can set up a routine for themselves in the morning, and it's geared. I mean, it works for any kid that needs that kind of help, but for like kids on the spectrum and kids maybe with ADHD who have a hard time staying on task, it's very engaging. And there's positive feedback, and there's a reward system, and games and puzzles, and you control as a parent. You can manage it from your phone through the parent app, and you can set up routines or step-by-step
Oh,
instructions for things. So, like, if your kid's trying to learn some independence or gain some independence and they need help, with like bedtime or something like that. You can have a step-by-step process. Like, you change into your pajamas and then you brush your teeth and then you wash your hands, or you go to the bathroom and you wash your hands and you brush your teeth, like whatever the step-by-step thing is. And then they can check it off as they go. And then it becomes like that muscle memory. Like they learn that routine, and then you can evolve it into something more complex over time, or you can have, chores set up so that they can, they know that it's time to do a chore, and step by step. And as they check it off, you get notified as a parent, and you can, you can set up reward systems and stuff, like whether it's allowances or, whatever the deal is for your kid. But it takes, it's sort of, if you ever have, I'm trying to think of the best way to describe it. Like if you have kids and you have to tell them no, or you have to take something away, or you have to constantly remind them, they get frustrated, they get angry. You don't want to be the person that they're angry at. And so you can throw goalie under the bus, right? Like you just
like, well, it's there.
It's right. I mean, and it's set up like that. And like my oldest, he's 22 and he's transitioning to more independent living, and he's doing really well, but he still needs, he just needs that little like nudge to remind him to do certain things. And he's using goalie because it's helping him remember the steps that he needs to do, like to take his meds, or to, get ready for bed, or, shower and shave and like do all that stuff. And so it helps him to navigate things on his own without me having to constantly tell him, which doesn't feel good for him. It doesn't feel good for me.
Right.
And it's empowering, for him. And you can scale it to different ages, and you can evolve it as you go. And so it can become more of just like a kid friendly Google, where you can just set reminders, or, whatever. And they also have, it also includes, some AAC, functionality. So like, text to speak. So for communication
nice.
skills. So there's like basic, it doesn't replace like a hardcore app, or like on an iPad or something like that. But it's, it has basic communication, so kids can type out what they need and it'll turn it into speech, help them express how they're feeling. I mean, there's all kinds of really cool things, and it's all in like one little device that is isolated from, it requires an internet connection, but it isolates them from being able to do anything other than maintain their schedule. So there's no distractions. There's no, it helps them stay focused. And you can either go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just gonna say that's awesome. Like keep going.
Yeah. They like Gavin, you can put the app on your phone and he could just use it on his phone, but he gets really into the games he's playing on his phone. And you know how they have like that game mode or something where it disables all the notifications that come in. So he's not paying attention to that stuff. So he has his set up on the other side of his room. So it kind of works like an alarm clock for him, and it'll pop up and it pulls him out of that place that he's in and directs him over to something else. And then he can, complete the task or do whatever it is that he wants to remind himself to do. Like sometimes it's just switching his laundry from the washer to the dryer, or taking the trash out, or just something that helps him to just navigate his day as a gentle prompt. And as a parent, like I could, if he were living on his own, I can monitor from my phone and just see if he's completing his tasks. And it's just a nice way to kind of, help him to gain that level of independence. And if it's empowering for him, he feels really good, and it works great for kids. He happens to be the one in the house that uses it the most anyways.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. And I am a huge productivity app junkie. Like I have tried all of the things, and I just this week, and I think it's because you might have sent me an email about it, started getting ads for Goalie. And as I'm like scrolling through, like it's definitely made me stop, like, ooh, I'm gonna need to check that one out. I hadn't clicked on it yet, but now it makes sense to me, like why I was getting those ads, because you talked about it.
Because
But
Google sees everything. Yeah.
right. I mean, I have Gmail, Google sees all. But yeah, so now it makes sense though. But it would normally, like, that's something that would normally be in my feed anyway, because I am such a productivity junkie. But I'm super excited about this one. I'm definitely going to check that out.
And it's for any kid, it's just like where I come into this is how can it help kids that are autistic, or how can it help parents navigate situations and just kind of make life just a little bit more manageable, a little bit easier, less stressful and stuff like that. And you know, there's a lot of stuff out there, and the two that I am the most passionate about, the ones that I stand behind like completely, are Mightier and Goalie at this point. I haven't. You just have to be careful,
Yeah.
with anything else, and it really is a very cool thing.
Yeah, that's so awesome. So any like these are awesome devices. So are there any apps in particular that are just apps that you've found helpful or that your child has responded well to?
Um, that's a harder question because
Yeah.
there's so many out there. But what I can share is I just had someone on my show a week ago. It's
Mhm.
called Bridging Apps, and they're part of Easter Seals, and they cater to people with special needs and disabilities, and they curate this whole thing of apps, and they have thousands that they curate and they categorize and they rate them and review them,
Nice.
and so that parents, if they're trying to find something that is appropriate for their child, you can go to their website and just do a search. Like if you're looking for communication software, you're looking for scheduling stuff, maybe, or maybe just like games that might be appropriate, for a child maybe that's developmentally delayed, or just what you're getting, and they like to bring people on who are living with disabilities
Mhm.
to review these games, and get honest feedback about how it impacts their lives and how it helps, and what they recommend it and what they like and what they don't like. And it's very inclusive. It's a very cool it's all free,
Mhm.
and it's just bridgingapps.org. And
Bridging apps. Put
yeah,
that
and
here.
they just help you sort through the millions and millions of apps that are floating around out there.
I found it. That's amazing. I love finding resources like this where, because everybody's different. And so something that's going to resonate with your kids,
Hmm.
might not resonate with somebody else's kids. And so finding a resource that is evaluating all of them and giving you the best and, tried
and
and
it's
true things. Yeah.
and it's free, right?
Yeah.
I mean, free resources, can't beat that.
Right. Right.
Yeah,
I mean,
and they're in it. I
I'm a
mean,
big,
I
go ahead.
was gonna say they're in it. They're very passionate about what they do. They're in it for the right reasons, and they don't take sponsorships. They work on grants, so like developers aren't paying them to review these apps. So they're
Right.
they're honest feedback, and I was very, very impressed with what they do.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you for that.
Mhm.
Definitely. And like I said, all of these things we will link in the descriptions. I'm putting that up here on the screen, but we'll link them all in the description when I'm done when this is over. So, um but thank you. That's a great resource. So we were talked a little bit like that goalie helps you with this, but with neurodivergent children, it can be hard or necessary to set limits. So, what kind of rules have your child or children responded to? Because I know you have multiple children
Yeah,
with.
that's a battle that I would like to say that I'm winning, but
I think all
honestly,
parents probably would like to say they're winning
yeah,
that fight.
and the thing with like autistic kids and kids with ADHD, like they naturally gravitate to those things, and so a lot of parents, you'll always see, kids out at restaurants or wherever they happen to be, and they have their iPad with them or something, and it's easy to assume that it's just too much screen time or whatever, and I mean ultimately it probably is, but it's what keeps those kids calm. It's what helps them stay regulated in the moment. It keeps them from being overstimulated by the stuff around them. And so there needs to be limits, I think, but it is. I would be a hypocrite if I like tried to offer advice because I haven't. I've been doing it for 20 years and I haven't found that perfect balance, because it is. it is harder for kids that need that kind of um, device or to kind of help them get through the day. Uh,
Yeah.
but I mean, there's always other options. Physical activity is a good thing to kind of get them, ways to decompress, or redirection is a good thing that doesn't always work. But um, I mean, it is, and anybody out there who deals with this understands, like, it's just, it's all, it's very individualized. There's no like cookie cutter solution.
Yeah.
Um, but generally speaking, I think guidelines and rules, I think, are important, especially for like sleep hygiene, because like with my guys, I try to keep them off of their stuff after a certain time, because it just interferes with their sleep and things like that. And then that
Right.
interferes with my sleep. And then that's not good for anybody. Right. So
Right.
you try to set reasonable guidelines, but you just have to be flexible and understand that, like, at least for kids in my situation, um, you need to kind of have customized solutions. It's not just we go to the pediatrician and they'll be like, well, they shouldn't be more than 20 hours, or 2 hours a day on the TV or something like that.
Yeah.
That's great, but
Sure.
like, it's a necessary thing sometimes, because you just one person, you can't whatever, and it is just what it is. But balance, I think, if you can balance things out, you're doing okay.
Yeah, and I agree with that. Even with my kids, I don't have really hard, fast rules of like you get 2 hours of screen time a day.
Mhm.
I do limit like the initial like, so I'll give them like 1 hour a day. But as soon as they hit that hour, they come to me, hey, can I have more time? And then, like, if they've done their chores, if they've like gone outside, or like
Mhm.
I evaluate every time. So then I'll grant, smaller
Yeah.
clumps of additional time, but I don't keep track of like how much time they've spent like over the course of the day. I
Right.
just like evaluate it each time they ask, and then I'm like, okay, yeah, you've done your homework, you've done everything, fine, you can have some more time.
Yeah. And then that makes perfect sense to me. I mean, because you're ultimately wanting them to gain a sense of responsibility, and to be able to sort of regulate that on their own. And if
Yeah.
we just apply these arbitrary rules that they don't understand or don't agree with, then they're going to be pushing back. But
Yeah.
if you give them a chance to earn that time, and learn responsibility and how to balance things out, I mean, they're going to be better for that in the long run. So I like that. It's a good approach,
No,
I think,
thanks.
at least.
Thanks. I try.
Welcome.
Um, but have there been like things where you've noticed, you're like, okay, it's time to like put the technology away for
Oh yeah.
today? Like, what are kind of those warning signs that you've seen?
My oldest, uh, and the Xbox or the PlayStation, they don't always do well together, right? Like, he likes he's into these really like hard games where like you get hit once and you die, right? And so
Oh,
he likes
sure.
the challenge of it.
Yeah.
And but in fact, it was just yesterday he started playing this new one, and I mean, he got so frustrated, and you can see it just building up. And like, if you know your kids, you can just see those gears turning, and you just know, okay,
Right.
like, we got to do something now. Uh, and I don't know. I mean, it's different for all of my kids. I mean, they all can experience the same thing, but they can do it in different ways, and it's different
Yeah.
circumstances or different stimulus that'll get them kind of in that place. And I try to just remove them from whatever that stimulus is, and if it's the game, we just shut it off. And
Right.
it's cool, like, with like the PS5 and the Xbox, like, you can shut it off without actually having to save it, and it will quick resume, so they don't actually lose anything that they're doing, but you can still
Right.
immediately remove them from, without having that fall out later. So
Yeah, like for example, when I was talking to I did a live with the gamer dad who lives in the UK, and we
mhm.
talked about this a lot, where, making sure that they're in a place where it's not going to lose any of their progress before you just like shut it down. I mean, and like you said, you're like, it's going to fast resume, it's going to be okay. As long as you've done that research and you know that game, and that's going to be okay, because you
Mm.
can create a whole mess of problems just by, making them lose progress in a game that's especially hard, like your child likes to play.
Yeah, and I remember when I was a kid, way back when.
Way back
Uh,
when there's just a
we
Nintendo.
right. Well, we was like the PlayStation, the very first PlayStation. Like
Yeah.
my brothers and I we were like really into Tomb Raider. Like have you ever played Tomb Raider? Like the original. You couldn't like you could play it for hours and not find a safe spot. You had to find those little
Right.
blue save crystals.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we would we'd invest so much time in that, and then you couldn't find a safe spot. And so like
Yeah.
you get panicky, and for a kid, like they're investing their time and their energy into something and they're working really hard. And if you don't have to take that progress away from them
Yeah.
and still address a problem,
Right.
I think you're farther ahead doing it that way. And I think that they're gonna probably benefit from it more. It'll be less of a negative thing for them and more of a, you know what, I just need to take a break and then
Right.
I can come back to it later. So
Yeah, for sure. Because, you could, cause a complete meltdown, especially for, a child with special needs,
yep.
by just, shutting it off like that. So, definitely being aware of what they're doing, and, if it's Tomb Raider and there's not a safe spot,
Ugh,
work with your child, and they'll probably respond a lot better if they
yeah.
if they know that you're not trying to make them lose, but you're like, but it's time to turn it off.
Yeah. It's sort of I mean, like I may not value the game progress the same way that they do,
Right.
but I also understand that it's important to them.
Yeah.
But at the same time, they can't allow themselves to get so invested in something that it makes them rage quit or something like that. That's what he was saying.
Right.
That's what he said yesterday. He's
Rage
like,
quit.
I've never rage quit on a game like this before. And I'm like, well, we need to not do that. I mean, let's take a break, and you can come back to it. And it's just balance, and you got to be creative and meet your kids kind of where they're at. And not everybody's in the same place. You gotta customize things. It's not a one size fits all thing. So I have different rules for each of my kids sometimes, and it just is what it is.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. When you said rage quit, I had the picture in my head of a family playing like Monopoly, and one guy just like
Flipping the board over. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's the rage quit.
Yeah. This is slamming a controller down, stomping around the house, and it's like,
Right.
oh man, it's just a game. Let's just not
Yeah.
taking years off
Um,
your life.
right. So when you do enforce these limits, what have you found works best in these situations?
I think how you approach it can directly impact how they respond. And
Yeah.
I'm guilty in the past of being frustrated and not approaching it in the best way, and it creates more of a problem, down the road.
Yeah.
But I think, I mean, like my youngest is 14, my oldest is 22, and I have a 16-year-old in the middle. So they're not adults, but they're not little kids, and
Yeah.
so um I've been guilty of trying to reason with my kids too much sometimes. But I
Mm,
think if you approach them in a respectful way, and like, look, I know this is important to you, but I can't have you throwing a controller across the room. I mean, they don't do that, but like, I can't have you
right.
doing things that are, not safe or not appropriate, or it's just not worth you getting that upset about.
Yeah.
So we can just shut it off. It'll save your stuff. You can pick it up. I'll make sure no one else logs into the same game and, removes your quick restore or your quick resume.
Yeah.
And we'll just go outside or go draw or go, you know, take a nap, like just do something else that helps you to decompress. And then you
Yeah.
can come back and try again. And
Yeah.
that seems to be the most successful approach. It doesn't always work, but
Well, sure.
nothing always does.
Right. Well, and I think that's also a good life lesson too, is that they understand, okay, if I'm getting too worked up about something, I just need to remove myself from the situation for a little
Mhm.
while and come back when I'm a bit calmer.
Yeah, makes perfect sense.
Right? Strange. So oh, I was gonna say the only time my husband has thrown a controller across the room is he was playing a scary game, and there was a jump
Mm,
scare. and he went like,
Yep.
and it, like the controller flew across the
Across the
room,
room.
but
Yep.
yeah, but he didn't do it in anger. He did it in fear. So
Big difference.
right, huge difference. It was just like a jump scare. He was just like, "Ah!" Anyway, um, so let's kind of move away. I mean, gaming is something, and you've kind of talked about this a little bit, but there's still some oversight that you need, for your 22-year-old, but you want to
Mhm.
give them, some more autonomy. So, and some of these limits that you set, like, say through Google Family Link or through the Apple sharing, turn off when your child turns 18.
Yeah.
But your 22-year-old still needs some help. So, what do you kind of and what are you doing, or have you even figured this one out yet, or what?
I haven't. I've tried some of the um like the like parental controls that are like third party stuff that kind of exceed and we're a Google household, so like it's Android everything. And
Woo-hoo!
there you go,
Preaching to the
right? That's
choir.
right. Uh we anything that I would try to do, they figure out a way around it.
Absolutely.
I had I can't remember what it was called, but I had something on there that like I could actually physically control his phone and lock it up or shut it down or whatever I needed to do from my phone. And he figured out that if he reboots his phone into safe mode, then he could uninstall it and get rid of it.
Yep.
And then it's just like, well, I mean, what do you do at that point? So it just
Right.
becomes a day at a time thing. Like my oldest is pretty good. He tends to stay away from anything that he recognizes as being inappropriate for himself. My younger kids, I feel like I have a good idea of what they do.
Mhm.
Like TikTok, I try to keep a closer eye on, and going down the YouTube rabbit hole because I like some of the stuff that they watch. I see no value in it. It's just noise, and
Right.
I'm like, we like one a day, like one a day,
Right.
and then that's it. Because like it's just screaming or something, and like how is that? I don't see the value in that. I mean, obviously there is because people do it and they make a lot of money, but like I um try to limit that kind of stuff and focus more on some of the more educational things. Maybe there's information about like my youngest just loves information and he loves knowledge and he loves learning, and so he'll find these channels that are like um can't remember what the guy's name was, Coyote. Can't remember what his name was, but he used to just go out into nature and like challenged himself to all these things. And he was like doing pain tests with like bee stings from all around the world, like just crazy, weird
Right.
stuff. But
I've seen a bee sting test. That's crazy.
yeah, and it's like, okay, I mean, there's some value to that, I guess.
Yeah.
You're learning something and it's not just noise, so
Yeah.
I try to just balance it out as best I can. I've not found um, a solution that would fit everybody, you know,
Sure. Yeah, that
or that
makes
they
sense.
can't get around. Kids are smart,
Yeah.
they
And they all talk to each other.
yeah,
Like, "Oh, you've got this one here. This is how you get
that's
around
how you
that."
do
Like,
it.
yeah.
Just boot it in a safe mode and then you can uninstall it.
Right.
It's like, I can't
Well, there's
believe he
even
figured that
like
out.
some entrepreneurial kids in like the junior high and high school where like you give them your phone and $10 and they'll like remove all the parental controls for you.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
they're the smart kids, smart kids. Um, so yeah, there's obviously nothing that's going to be a one size fits all. There's gonna be ways around everything.
Mhm.
I talk to parents all the time and I'm like, yeah, you can do this and this. And I have a ton of controls and stuff in place, but I'm not naive to think that it's going to like be a one-stop shop. I've got it all set up and I'm done.
Right?
It's gonna be something that I'm gonna need to check in on. I'm also, they're going to get around it. So I need to, have conversations like, hey, noticed you removed this, that means you lose your phone or something like that.
How
Just
do you balance? I'm sorry. Go
no,
ahead.
no, please do.
Well,
Go ahead.
how do you balance privacy? Because what I get from my kids is, well, I have no privacy, and I'm like, well, I mean, not on a phone that I'm paying for and that I own, and that is, potentially giving you access to dangerous things. I mean, you don't have the right to just talk to random. Well, I don't. As a parent, it's my job to make sure that they're safe online, and everything is online now. So it's
Right.
not like when we were kids where we spent all of our time outside or was just watching cartoons
Right.
or something. Right now,
Right.
it's they're whether it's on their watch or on their phone or on their tablet or whatever. Uh, Being able to make sure that they're safe and that they feel comfortable talking to you if something gets weird,
Yeah.
because people out there that are targeting kids, they know what they're doing. They know the right thing to say. They know
Yep.
how to exploit a situation. And I think that if we empower our kids to better understand what the risks are without scaring them,
Right.
they're in a place to better protect themselves. And you keep that line of communication open, and then they feel comfortable coming to you, like, hey, like, dad, this is kind of weird. And I'll look at it, I'll be like, that is definitely weird. That's
Right.
block, report, and delete.
Right. Move on.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and so there's no judgment. It just, you know what I mean?
Right.
Just try and I don't know,
So there's
figure it
two
out as you
things
go.
there's two things I always say about the whole privacy argument. And the first one is uh there is no privacy. Like, if you think that your private conversation with your best friend is going to stay private forever, you are sorely mistaken.
Yep.
So, whether that's the world in general or your parent, you won't have any privacy if you are on a internet connected device.
Mhm.
That's just the way it is. Like, I don't expect that I have privacy on my phone, even though nobody's watching anything that I'm doing on my phone. But I don't think that, something I send privately to my friend, they can screenshot it, send it to somebody else.
Mhm.
There is no privacy when you're talking about online. And so that's what I always tell my kids. I'm like, you shouldn't have any false sense of privacy, whether it's from me, whether it's from the world in general. Like, anything you put out there can be used against you in the future. And I bring up a lot of like celebrities who will tweet something 20 years ago
Yep.
that seemed benign at the time and comes back to bite them and get them canceled now because they tweeted it 20 years ago.
Mhm.
Well, I guess there's no Twitter 20 years ago, but
Well, yeah, yeah.
but a long time ago,
The
you
internet
see
doesn't
it
forget.
all the time. They don't forget.
No,
Yeah.
you put it out there, and it's always going to be out there. There's no practical way to ensure that you put something out there that you were like, "Ooh, boy, I wish I hadn't done that."
Right.
I mean, you live, you learn. Let's not do that again because that is never going away. I
Right.
mean, it just and it's kind of the world that we live in now. And privacy, I guess you're right. I mean, it's like this. It's an illusion, really,
Right.
kind of like control. Like we have no control over most of things that go on, right? You recognize that, and like people monitor my phone. Like I don't
Right.
really care. I mean, like I'm not doing anything that I need to hide.
Right.
I'm not naive to the fact that they're pulling data for ad purposes and
You
whatever. Just
sent
like
me an email about
the
goalie and
goalie,
I'm getting
yeah,
ads for goalie. So,
yeah. I mean, so it is
obviously.
it is what it is. But that's a good idea. Like helping them to understand that there really is no privacy with
Right.
anything that has to do with the internet. I mean, there
Right.
just isn't.
Yeah. So that's the main thing I usually harp on when they're like, I deserve privacy. I'm like, yeah, you can have all the privacy you want in your bedroom with a pen and a piece of paper, private it up. Like, go ahead. I don't care. And, or if you're like, speaking on the phone to somebody, great. All the privacy you want. I'm not going to monitor your phone call conversation. But when you write something that can be used against you in the future, you better believe I'm monitoring that because I don't want that to come back and bite you in the future.
Yeah, it could be taken out of context, or
Yeah.
the meaning of things changes 20 years from now, and
Right.
and things. kids make stupid mistakes. I mean,
Right.
they just do, right? I mean, we've all done it,
Yeah.
and they they don't. I don't think that they understand how impactful. I mean, you look at like Facebook and all these people that like they go on their college spring breaks and all the crazy stuff that they put out there, and then they go for a job interview, and one of the first things they do is they pull your social media up and they
Yep.
want to see like what are you doing, and then they see spring break of whatever year, and they're like, I don't think so. Like that's not what we
Right.
are about,
Right.
and you
We're gonna
can't
pass
make it
on
go
that
away.
one.
Yeah,
No, exactly.
it's
So that's
consequences.
my main argument for the privacy argument. The second argument, because then they're like, "Well, don't you trust me?"
Oh,
I'm like, "It's it's not about trust." And I'm like, "It's not seatbelts are not required because the government doesn't trust you to stay seated. Like you're gonna stay seated in your car. It's not that the government doesn't trust you to stay seated. It's there to protect you in case the crap hits the fan, you
yeah,
know." And so that's the same with parental controls that I usually talk about is my parental controls are not in place because I don't trust you. They're in place because when something hits the fan, it's going to help protect you from that.
yeah, and you have no control over what other people are doing, right?
Right.
So with the internet, you're at the mercy of whoever's on the other side of a keyboard,
Yep.
and there's no way to mitigate that really. And parental controls are a it's a safety net, and the
Yep.
kids don't appreciate it right now, but they will at some
Right.
point,
They will.
when they have kids and they start seeing what's going on. Like when you have a kid, it changes everything, right? And so you
For
just
sure.
you start thinking about all the safety stuff and the precautions and stuff like that that you were annoyed at when you were a kid, but now you understand the value of it. And maybe hopefully someday that they'll come back and they'll be like, thank you for parental controls, right? Like,
Right. And it's so funny to me. I mean, I've got really thick skin, so nobody would really be able to offend me or hurt my feelings or anything like that. So I get comments constantly on my Instagram, on YouTube, like, I would hate to be this person's children and you're the worst parent ever, etc., etc., etc. And every single time I'm like, come back to me when you've got kids. I'd love to hear your perspective on this whole thing after you've had a
yeah,
child.
because most of these people aren't parents.
They're not.
They're
None
coming
of
at it
them
from the
are. Yeah.
perspective of a kid,
Right.
right? And yeah, being a parent changes everything. Changes
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah, for sure. Well, is there anything else we didn't cover? I mean, like I said, I don't have kids with special needs, so I don't know exactly what else that we need to cover, but I'd love to get your opinion.
I I think that it's tough because everybody is so different. But I guess at the end of the day, the safest advice that I have that'll just cover everything is just trust your gut. Like you're the parent, you know better than anybody else. I mean, you know your kid better than anybody else, right? And you're going to make mistakes. You're not perfect, you're human. And I always tell people, I'm like, you're never going to be the perfect parent, but you're the perfect person to parent your kid. And just, you know, learn from your mistakes and take time for yourself, put back into yourself, like self-care, all that kind of stuff, because it's
Yeah.
tough. I mean, parenting is tough, period. And having kids with additional challenges just takes that much more out of you. And we have to, it's a long game, right? It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. So we got to put back into ourselves. And if you feel, parental controls, you need to do that for your kid. They don't have to like it, right? They don't get a vote. You just, it is what it is. And if you decide down the road that it was the wrong choice, then it was the wrong choice, and you learn something different, and you move on. It's just what it is, and we're all doing it a day at a time. There is no instruction book for any kid, and you know, just like you said, you got to have thick skin and
Yeah.
do what you think you need to do, and let that be it.
Totally not unrelated, but is there anything in particular that you do to unwind and when you've had a particularly hard day with your kids, and
Mm.
what kind of helps you out?
Uh, when I started writing, like I was talking to you about before we started recording or going live, that was very therapeutic for me. It started out as like I thought, and this is my naivete when it came to the internet back in 2010. I thought WordPress was a private thing and I could just write whatever I want. Nobody would ever see it. and it doesn't work that way, right? I mean, it could, I guess, if you knew what you were doing, but I didn't know what I was
Yeah.
doing.
Right.
And so what I put out there was everywhere. And and I learned that it was helpful to people. And so, it helped me to kind of deal with all the anxiety and the stress and stuff. And aside from that, like I like working out. That's a big thing for me is just going and decompressing and spending all that negative energy in a constructive way and then coming back and whatever. I
Yeah.
do love Minecraft because I
Oh,
can
nice.
make everything perfect.
It's like
And
Legos online.
it is, and you have complete control of everything. I mean,
Yeah.
you have no control in your life except for in Minecraft. Um, and that, I like talking to people, and I like doing podcast interviews and stuff like that. It's just
Yeah.
it keeps me it pulls me out of the world that I sort of tend to lock myself up in, and um, it's good. You should definitely not isolate yourself.
Sure. Find like parents that, are kind of
Yeah,
dealing with the same thing that you are.
yeah,
I like
and it's a
that.
lot easier to do now than it was,
Right.
20 years ago. Yeah, so
Yeah.
now they're everywhere,
Yeah, I'm
and
sure there's, like, Reddit forums and Discord servers and everything
yeah,
that you
they're
can
everywhere,
join.
and you just find someone or you find a group of people that you can relate with, even if you never meet them in real life. I mean, most of the connections people have now online, anyways, and it can make a big difference. I mean, you
Yeah.
have people who I've had people who have made comments to me that, um, they were so overwhelmed, they were so desperate, and that they were going to end their life,
Mhm.
and they stumbled across my blog somehow, and they were reading like this post that I wrote on a really bad day, and it occurred to them that they're not alone. Like there's other people out there, and you just have to find them, and so that feels really good to be able to, use my experience to have a positive impact on someone somewhere,
Yeah. Right.
and that helps me to just, keep going. And my kids are awesome.
Well,
So,
sure.
you know,
They look awesome. Like, I,
thank you.
checked out your stuff when I was researching who to talk to about this.
They will
But yeah, it
drive me
looks like
crazy, but
right.
that's their job.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you so much. I will link his podcast below as well. So make sure you check out his podcast and the products that he mentioned. I'm going to grab those links from him right now, and then we'll link those below as well. So, um, you know, definitely awesome advice. Thank you so much for,
Thank you for having me.
yeah, it's amazing. Like I said, I've wanted to do a special needs one for a really long time. So I'm really glad that I was able to get to do that with him today.
And it works both ways because there's a lot of parents in this community that are looking for solutions to problems, and they have to step outside of that
Yeah.
and rely on people like you to keep doing what you're doing so that they can, keep their kids safe or better understand the stuff that their kids are using so that they can stay ahead of the curve a little bit and help them out with that. So thank you for everything that you're doing.
Oh, thank you. Been trying. Just want to help, like we mentioned this right before we started, both of us are just super passionate about helping families. And
Mhm.
I think that's a great synergy today. So
Yep.
super excited to get out there and help anybody. If you have any questions for Rob or questions for me, you can go ahead and leave those in the comments, and we'll try and respond to those if we get to them. Or you can reach out to him on Instagram. It's just the Autism Dad, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so the Autism Dad, I'm Family Tech on Instagram as well. So you can reach out to us there as well.
Very cool. Thank you for this. This was really cool.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you guys so much for attending, and we will see you next Friday.